Tradesmen of the world, have women ever offered intercourse on the job, and why did you accept or decline?
Experience 1. Not my story, but a buddy of mine who was a self-employed welder. He would do calls mostly to ranches, barns, and other rural and livestock types, usually repairing gates, corrals, and equipment. Anyhow, he showed up one day at a stable for 4-H kids and was going to fix some fencing for the paddock. The lady who ran the stables mentioned her husband was out of town picking up a horse they bought. Long story short, she invited him inside to cool off. This is 102-degree Texas weather, so anyone would naturally take the offer. She gave him a tall glass of tea, water, and some fruit to cool off while she went to change. Within a couple of minutes, she came down the stairs in just panties and asked if he wanted to take a nice cool shower. He told me it was really hard to say no, but he declined only because he had been cheated on before and never wanted another man to feel that pain. Edit, since a couple of people asked. 4-H is a program across the U.S. that helps kids and teenagers with development skills in science, agriculture, community outreach, and various other programs. In this case, the 4-H club was agriculture. So, they learn how to ride horses, care for them, feed them, brush them, etc. Experience 2. I'm a general contractor and had a government contract to rehab and take care of construction stuff in low-income apartments. I replaced a GC who was fired because his men kept on having relations with the residents in exchange for stuff. So, I made a rule where my guys had to be in pairs whenever they entered an apartment. On the first day, 2 of my guys went into this lady's apartment to replace the front door because her old one was kicked in. She met them naked and offered to take them both on if they could also get her a new fridge. Experience 3. Had a roommate do renovation work on the side. Ended up doing a kitchen remodel for a single nurse. As he tells it, they talked and joked around a lot while he was working. Then one afternoon, she commented on his tool belt and asked if he'd ever considered showing up only wearing the tool belt. He ended up staying there for 3 consecutive days, pounding his hammer. They are happily married now with 4 kids. Experience 4. I delivered pizzas during COVID-19. I got an order from a familiar address, so I took it, and the woman answered the door topless. She paid for the food and then invited me in and had intercourse with me on the couch. It was my wife. She ordered the food so I would deliver it and come have intercourse with her while I was working. I also got to have leftover pizza when I came home from work. Good day. Experience 5. I had an exterior remodeling business. Met up for an initial consult with a woman I had mutual friends with. As I was getting ready to leave, she said,
Screw me if I'm wrong, but you can get to my project next week, right?
I chuckled and said,
Unfortunately not.
And told her I was booked out for a few months. She said,
Guess you're coming in for a little bit now then.
How could I turn that down? Experience 6. Only heard of it happening once. The worker was single and in really good shape. And the woman at the house was married with younger kids. Not sure how it happened, but he fell in love with her and ruined her marriage. He went crazy chasing her and she went back to her husband. Word on the street is that her husband ended up leaving her a year later and got to keep the kids, and she ended up paying child support and alimony to him after cheating. It was a lose-lose all around. Oh, and the business the husband and wife were running together went under, and their handful of employees consequently lost their jobs too. Experience 7. When I was a teenager, I was canvassing for a double glazing company. A woman opened the door in her dressing gown and kept making jokes about how she wasn't dressed. She asked if I wanted to wait inside while she changed. Confused, I declined and said I could come back later. She then said that it was really hot outside and told me that if I came in, she'd make me some fresh lemonade. I told her that I didn't want to inconvenience her and had work to do. She told me I could come back later if I got bored. When I met my colleagues at the end of the afternoon and told them the story, they explained what was actually going on. Experience 8. No, But after the big freeze in Texas, I did fix this old woman's broken pipes. She hadn't bathed in weeks. It was heartbreaking, honestly. Anyway, once I turned the shower on, she started crying and kissing me on the cheek and insisting I stay for dinner and that I was a real hero. I had to decline because there were other pipes in the apartment complex to be fixed that night. Edit, now that I think about it, that was the best job I've been on. My coworkers had families to go home to, but nobody cared. We were all motivated to get the water back on for this whole complex. Late nights and heavy emotions. Experience 9. Out of high school, I worked in a fabrication shop that constructed handmade steel and iron accessories, the kind of stuff you find in rich houses that were overly extravagant and obviously expensive to look at. I got hired basically to keep the old man busy. He was who started the shop as a blacksmith and had retired but wouldn't slow down and kept constantly being in the shop harassing employees and just generally kind of disrupting production. Really old school Italian, probably 5 feet 5 inches with hands that were big as baseball gloves and skin that was equally just like leather. Real hard ass and a stickler for the old school way of doing stuff, hence why he was constantly giving the employees crap. Anyway, I was just essentially supposed to be his gopher boy and keep him busy with my presence. He had plenty to teach me about the proper way to cut grass, how to drive an old tractor, how to dodge tools being thrown at you while you're picking up scraps from the shop floor too slowly for his liking, that sort of thing. One day we needed something from town, and the boss gave me the keys to the company truck to run out quickly and grab whatever it was. The old man sees me get into the car, waves me down as I'm leaving, and grabs my arm with the strength of a shoreman trying to tie down a mainsail in a storm. He looks me in the eyes and tells me, "You listen now, and you listen well. I don't care where you go, I don't care who you see, I don't care who asks you. When the woman at home tells you to come inside, you say no and you get the money instead. You never take the woman, you see? You always take the money." I won't lie, as an 18-year-old, I was really digging the prospect of getting prepositioned by bored cougar housewives daily, but truthfully, I was more scared of getting buried under the old man's tomato plants if I ever came back without the money. Experience 10. I worked at Papa John's in high school as a delivery driver. One of my deliveries was to a house where a bunch of middle-aged women were having a ladies' night. They flirted for a few minutes and made some pretty obvious jokes. "Is pizza the only thing you deliver?" etc. Before I left, the hostess asked me to swing back by when I got off. Almost 20 years later, I'm still kicking myself for not going back. Experience 11. Taught martial arts, and a student's mom wanted to talk about private lessons for her and her son. So, I was like, okay, but then she was like, "Oh, but can we meet at Barnes and Noble because I will be too busy to talk at school?" So, I said fine. I got to Barnes and Noble and the mom was by herself, and we started talking, and she said, "What do I think about an older woman?" And I said, "They are older." She asked if I wanted to go to her house, which I declined. She called the school I work for saying I asked her on a date, and I was making sexual advances. Thankfully, I had the text saved where she asked me to meet her. Experience 12. I delivered pizzas for a local mom-and-pop pizza shop more than 30 years ago. There was one house that would call in orders, and the other drivers would openly argue over whose turn it was to deliver to this address. Being the new guy on the crew, I never got the chance, nor would they tell me what the deal was, so my imagination ran wild. Well, one day the stars aligned, and I finally got the opportunity. To my disappointment, it turned out that the deal was that it was an older gentleman who lived alone and offered a $100 tip for you to watch adult explicit videos and jerk off while he watched. Experience 13. When I was 16, I worked as a window washer. I worked with a bunch of ex-convicts who were all hilarious. One day we were on the side of a medical building. Look in and see a bunch of nurses pointing and smiling at us. We point and smile back. One of the guys I'm with grabs his phone and types on it if one of them is single. She grabs a notepad and writes back yes. They go back and forth and set up a date later that day. The other guy I'm with typed that we were so hot and tired if one of them could flash their boobs to help us get through the day. They laughed, and sure as crap one of them flashed us her titties. Great day on the job. The guy told us he ended up banging this nurse in his car after they met up for drinks. Can't verify its truth, but I believed him. Experience 14. 19 and worked on my family's farm while in college, mostly irrigation, tractor work, and shearing. One season the neighboring farm asked if I would be interested in working for them for a day or two, jumped at the opportunity since the money was really good and I enjoyed the physical workout. I had just gotten into rugby that year and the farm work helped me. My usual farm attire is jeans, bunnies, a singlet, and a long-sleeve flanny. The next few days it's supposed to be around 35 degrees. I woke up early in the morning, got my gear set up, and met the father, his wife, and his daughter Rebecca. The daughter is 2 years older than me. I met the rest of the crew, and we smashed it out. The first day we get most of it done. Day 2, I get there around 7 a.m. and it's around 19 degrees already. I briefly noticed the parents' vehicles weren't in the garage as I made my way down to the shearing sheds. It's almost lunchtime and I'm already hot as hell, feels like 40. I got sweat happening. I pull off my fanny, wipe my face down, and power through the last 10 heads. Done. I take a small break and start carting my gear to my truck. As I'm passing the house with my last few things, I hear Rebecca call my name from the fly screen door. I make my way up and stand outside the screen. I'm blind as heck because I didn't even notice she was naked at the time. She opened the screen door and yanked me in real fast. I remember feeling really disrespected for entering the house with my boots on. LOL, that boat sailed through when she just straight up said screw me while laying down on a towel she had placed. 1. Didn't think I had any energy left over. I was wrong. 2. I like to be a little rough. And 3. I'll never forget how nice and cold the towels felt while we screwed. It wasn't my first time, but I'll always remember that one. Pretty sure she has like 3 kids now last time I heard. Experience 15. When I was younger, I worked as a bouncer for nearly 15 years, plus as a valet, barback, etc. For a while, I worked in a high-end nightclub. The single most common occurrence was being asked to join a couple. Usually, I'd be approached by the man who would introduce me to his wife. They'd chat with me, then at some point he'd leave, and she would start heavy flirting. When I was very young, the number of older women who would aggressively ask for intercourse was unnerving, mostly because they'd go about it in the most disrespectful and harassing ways. They weren't flirting, they were aggressively grabbing my hand as I gave back their ID and shoving it down their shirts, or going to grab my crotch, or whatever else they felt like. We also hosted a sorority party once and that was awful. I think it was like a pre-game event for them before they went to their actual night out, so it was just the sorority members. I think too many attractive women together made it a sort of game to see who could get attention from a man. It taught me a lot about consent and victim blaming. I remember one night I was just sitting on a stool at closing making sure people dumped any drinks before heading outside. The lights were up and it was about as chill as it gets in security. And a very drunk woman walked up to me, handed me her drink, and then leaned in and kissed me right on the mouth. I squirmed and pushed her off, and thank God her friend caught her and ushered her outside. Still, I remember thinking if my girlfriend came home and said some drunk guy kissed her, I'd be pissed at her, but the same just happened to me and it was entirely not my fault and it completely changed the way I viewed stories of sexual harassment and assault. The real story here though is that really, you never want to act in any of these situations. The people who are outwardly and conventionally attractive don't need to offer intercourse for services, at least at the bar, because they can get the same services for free from any of the other guys in the bar. The people who are just doing it for a laugh, the older ladies out for a night, for example, are incredibly demeaning because it truly is the you aren't a person, you are just a representation of intercourse and that's all I need you for. The people who will genuinely trade intercourse for entrance to a club or free drinks probably need to work on themselves and generally need to do that work before you really want to entangle your life in theirs. It's a pretty desperate move to offer intercourse for a $25 cover charge. The absolute best were bachelorette parties. They'd often have these bingo cards or checklists, and it would be things like take a picture with a bouncer or give a guy your number, and they'd always be respectful and giggly. It was just some silly thing and they'd laugh, say thank you, and move on. They'd always come up and ask first. Edit little more context on the bachelorette parties. This place was a restaurant and nightclub, and so what would happen is the hostess would try and sit them at a big table across the back and have a guy wait on them for dinner, so usually that was me. Later on, I'd change my shirt to do security work and the party would come up and it was all woo OMG Corp counsel at us from dinner, who do you remember us? And I'd be thinking, yeah, it was 30 minutes ago and you were the largest table I had tonight, but instead I'd say, whoa, of course, that's awesome, is everyone having fun? I don't know, they always were super fun and I never felt like they were trying to cross boundaries. Sometimes they had their little drama. I'd see someone crying or stomping off from the group, but it never was something security had to take care of. The saddest was that at a high-end place, a guy used to come in regularly and he'd bring different girls. This is all totally normal, but the manager told me when I first started to never card his girlfriends ever, which I just sort of shrugged at. But much later I realized they were most likely being trafficked or in some sort of prostitution setup.
We hope you enjoyed listening to today's stories. If you want to see more stories, check out these videos or check the links in the description for more videos. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And ring that notification bell.